I am Grady Colleen in the CapeCod.com News Center, and welcome to Sunday Journal. I'm joined today by a special guest from the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce. Do you mind introducing yourself for our listeners?
Sure. My name is Paul Niedzwiecki, and I am the CEO of the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me in studio today.
Glad to be here, Grady.
So there's a lot of things going on across the Cape as of late in terms of economic challenges and various business topics I wanted to touch on with you. But first and foremost, we have migrant families that are staying in Yarmouth, Bourne, Eastham, other communities across the Cape, Joint Base Cape Cod, that's leading to a region-wide discussion on immigration. We wanted to talk a little bit more in the light of there's been support, there's been some protests. The Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce has been in that conversation as well, it seems. We wanted to catch up with you following your CEO Corner series, actually. You punctuate that by saying how we can navigate the issue in a way that poses an opportunity for the Cape's economy. Do you mind just elaborating a little bit more on what you've been seeing over the past few weeks from local businesses?
Sure. Well, I mean, it's really a statewide issue.
Sure.
The migrant issue. At this point, we've got over 6,500 families that are in-state and almost adding 1,000 families a month, which has been a tremendous drain on the state resources. And as these families are moved into communities and municipalities, it's been a tremendous strain on those municipalities as well. On the Cape, though, with the seasonal economy that we have relied on foreign-born workers for decades now, to support our seasonal economy, especially those J1 students that are here as cultural exchange students and the H-2B visa program. So we see the opportunity is if we can expedite the work authorization for the migrant families that are here. I mean, across the state, 74% of the businesses across the state report vacancies, and most of those businesses are reporting that 10% of their employees of the positions that they have available are open. And so that's really where we are. The number one pressing issue for businesses in the state and on the Cape is a labor supply issue. So we see that the potential for these two challenges really to meet up, the migrant challenge and the labor supply challenge, in a way that benefits the region and everyone else.
Mm-hmm. It's very interesting. As well, have any of the people that have been in this conversation with you guys been municipalities or towns? Have you been speaking with anybody from, say, Yarmouth or Bourne?
Yes, I've had conversations with two of the town managers on the issue, very sensitive to the challenges they face locally, and have been advocating for complete transparency, really. I mean, I think that is what a lot of the communities are most concerned about, is to sort of these families are just showing up and putting burdens on municipal resources without really the kind of notice or the kind of financial support from the state necessary to make this have the least impact on the community as possible.
Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of this comes down to that workforce authorization that has been that's kind of what the major hold-up is. So a lot of this is state and federal. What kind of tools do we have at the local level to kind of help with this?
Most of the immigration policy out there in the work authorization process is a federal process, and that's really what we have. Is we have sort of mismatched policies on sort of a state and federal level, and really the federal immigration policies are just a mess. And it's not, I mean, both of my grandparents emigrated from Poland. They came here not speaking the language. They went to Lowell, Massachusetts, and they worked in shoe factories up there immediately, not speaking the language. And we need immigration in order for the economy to grow nationally, on a state level certainly, and on a regional level. We're just not having enough babies. But if they're not allowed to work, that creates a drain on public resources, and it creates strain in communities, and it really holds back the families that are coming here because they just want a better life for themselves and their family.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, as well, you already brought it up, the J1 and the H-2B visa worker program. It seems like foreign-born employees are no stranger to Cape businesses when it comes to the summer season.
No, they're no stranger. And if we look at J1s, for example, in 2018, we had 5,000 J1 student visas that were working as part of the seasonal economy on the Cape. There are only 100,000 permits available nationally for that program. So that shows you how heavily reliant the Cape economy has been on foreign-born workers. And we've added a housing coordinator this year, and just in sort of the first 3 or 4 months, we placed over 100 of those students, and we increased the host network, these families that host these students, by 50. And we just had sort of an end of season celebration with those families, and it really is a cultural exchange. It really does add a lot of richness to the community, and the students really enjoy being here on the Cape. It's one of the more preferred destinations of J1 students around the world. So it's been a great program. A lot of these people come back. Our housing coordinator that we hired to do this program was actually a J1 student 10 years ago. And she's been a resident of the Cape now for 10 years, raising a family here. Mm-hmm. So it's an incredibly rich program, both for the participants, the communities here on the Cape, and certainly for the economy.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I believe Christina Arbajiva is.
Yes.
She was a lovely guest on Sunday Journal a few weeks ago as well.
She's tremendous.
Wonderful. I'm glad that went so well. But that is interesting. So, I mean, it sounds like a lot of parallels can be made between the J1 program, some of the things that's going on here now. Do you think we can maybe, dare we say, guess that some people might end up becoming like year-round residents of the Cape Cod region, join the community if they were simply allowed to work?
That's certainly a possibility. I mean, we have so many openings right now across the region, and work. Work is the easiest way to solve the problem. Mm-hmm. And we have been using J1 and H2B visa holders for decades. So we that's why we see the possibility of a way to meet the migrant challenge by expediting their ability to work.
Mm-hmm. Now, just to make sure that we're playing both sides as well, some of the protests have been centered around the idea that we have a lot of people struggling with affordable housing already on Cape Cod,
Absolutely.
Veteran populations as well. Do you think that maybe the reception would have been a little bit warmer if we didn't already struggle with our own housing issues on Cape Cod?
I don't know that it would have been warmer. I think immigration has been an issue, a hot-button issue for a long time in this country. Especially as of late. So I'm not sure that it would have been any warmer, but there's a real issue there, and that issue is a housing issue. So if you can make up to $80,000 as a family on the Cape and qualify for subsidized housing if you can find it, you can't break into the market until you're a family that makes $210,000 a year. That's most of us. So would it be difficult for immigrants to come here and start at an entry-level job in hospitality and buy a house? Yeah, it would be impossible for them, just like it would be impossible for everyone else. But we find ways to sort of make that work, and I don't see that as an issue that would stop us from continuing to push for work authorization for these migrants.
Mm-hmm. Now, interestingly, we also want to talk with you more about affordable housing in general, and this kind of brings us to some of the other major topics going on, which is the bridge replacement plan. Now, I bring that up because as well, I believe, according to the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce, nearly half of our workers actually live off Cape now recently. Is that true?
That's true. About 47% of the jobs on Cape are done by people who do not live on the Cape. And almost a third of our entire workforce crosses those two bridges every day.
Wow. All right. So as we're seeing the Bourne Bridge work ongoing, that's a major detriment.
It's a major detriment. It's a major economic drag. The construction on the Sagamore in the spring was also very disruptive to the economy. And as those bridges approach 100 years old, the maintenance on them is going to become more intense and more frequent. Mm-hmm. And so that means disrupting the economy more often. So the bridges need to be replaced. The governor has put in an application to replace the Sagamore. The total cost for replacing both bridges has come in at $4.5 billion now. The Federal Highway Administration was here over the summer to sit down with the state and the Army Corps and work through those numbers. And if we look at what's available in the Bridge Improvement Program and other programs associated with the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act that was passed 2 years ago, I think the governor felt that a $1.5 billion ask was probably 1.6 was as much as we were going to get. So she put in a very thoughtful and comprehensive application with a sufficient state match for the Sagamore, but that still leaves the issue of the Bourne Bridge open. And so at a meeting that we had with the Bridge Advisory Council last week, the Army Corps was asked, I asked the question, I said, there's a 2020 Army Corps of Engineers report that says that the Bourne Bridge will need a major rehabilitation within 5 years. So where are you at with that? And basically they said they were they run in a 2-year federal budget cycle, but they were in the process of beginning the evaluation of what it would take to rehabilitate the Bourne Bridge. Now that's a $100 million+ project. So that removes that from potential resources to replace the Bourne Bridge. But more importantly, it's a 3.5-year project that would require a complete closure of that bridge for 6 to 12 months. And that's just not something that we can survive as an economy, and especially communities like Bourne and Falmouth would be negatively impacted in a way. I mean, it would leave an economic scar that would last a generation or two. So we can't do that. So we have to replace Bourne. And so that's where the discussion is right now. We're hopeful that we'll get the funding for the Sagamore, but we can't relax. We've got to replace both of these bridges, and they have to be replaced pretty close in time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now I know hindsight's 2020, but it sounds like over 100 years ago we might have made a mistake with this canal. What do you think?
Well, I think 100 years ago we needed the canal.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there were good reasons to sort of to put that in, have the Army Corps take it over. I think the Army Corps have been tremendous custodians of those bridges. I mean, they really put a lot of work and some resources into those bridges. Whether we need the canal now or not is a different discussion. Mm-hmm. Navigation is a lot different now, and circumnavigating the Cape is not doesn't take as long, and it's not as dangerous as it was 100 years ago. So if for some reason sufficient federal funds aren't available to replace both of the bridges, potentially there should be a discussion about what the viability of the canal, or at least the types of vessels that use the canal. I mean, if we could build, causeway bridges, lower bridges, they might be lower cost. And if the Sagamore application is unsuccessful, those are the kind of discussions. It's really the only next step that we have.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, I know as a local Cape Codder, we joke often about the idea of the tunnel under the canal.
Yeah.
It is fictional, unfortunately, but it starts to become a little bit more appealing every day.
Well, it'd be nice if it were there, but it's not. And tunnels are very expensive. Anytime you put a shovel in the ground, you never really know what you're going to find. I think we saw that in the Big Dig in Boston. So bridges are the way to go. We already have the infrastructure on both sides of those bridges that are set up. So it's the most efficient, least costly way to make sure that we can cross the canal. And that's what we're trying to push, is that two-bridge replacement option.
Right. So as well, I mean, you're, I believe, a very number-focused gentleman, much like myself. I appreciate that. I wonder if there is some way to eventually do a steadier crunch of how much maintenance work impacts directly the Cape's economy in terms of number value.
Yeah, I believe the Cape Cod Commission is taking a look at that right now.
Really?
Yeah, the economic impact of the bridges. I can tell you just from members that in the spring that we had hospitality cancellations related to the bridge traffic. Mm-hmm. They were cancellations that were really related to the media coverage of the bridge traffic. So there's that piece of it too.
Oops.
We've got to be better at communicating real-time information about traffic congestion on the Cape so people can check for themselves. But it did have an impact in the spring, and it's having an impact now in the fall. So with two sort of 8-week programs, even if they're 6 weeks apiece, we're talking about a quarter of the year. This calendar year, the Cape will have lived under single-lane restrictions on one of the bridges. And that comes at a real economic cost for business on the Cape.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, good luck in all of the structures. We'd love to catch up as well as this continues to move forward. It seems like it's definitely a slow and steady wins the race kind of thing. But as you mentioned before, it is 2023, so that means 2 more years before that study is requiring that maintenance work for the Bourne.
Yeah, I mean, even the governor's application for Sagamore doesn't have a start date until 2026 or 2027 with a completion date in 2036. So both of the bridges will be more than 100 years old before that bridge is completed, if that grant opportunity sort of comes down and that 7 to 10 year construction schedule isn't expedited in some way.
Mm-hmm. Now, as well, I just wanted to talk with you general about business on the Cape. We just wrapped up our summer season. We have that shoulder season that we've been trying to see what we've been pushing for as a general economic struggle as of late, the second summer initiative. How do you think that's been going as of late with events and other things like Love Live Local pushing for it? Do you think that's starting to work its way into the minds of visitors?
Absolutely. I mean, we are much busier in September and October than we have been. So that second summer concept is really set. And the weather has certainly been cooperating. The weather in September and so far through October, in many ways, has been better than the weather was in June. So it's it used to be, if you ask any local what your favorite month was on the Cape, it's either going to be September or October. So that is valid. We had a good summer. We're coming off of two unprecedentedly hot, economically active summers as we came out of the COVID-19 restrictions, and people couldn't travel. But now you can read articles about Spain and Italy complaining that they're overrun with tourists that were all here 2 summers ago. So what we're looking at are 2018, 2019 benchmarks for where we are in the economy, and we're definitely ahead of those benchmarks and headed in the right direction. I mean, the Cape did really well through COVID-19 from a hospitality perspective, and that's, in large part, that's because we're not a resort community, we're a second homeowner community. Mm-hmm. So that makes us much more resilient, and it's a place where people go in times of turmoil. I mean, we saw an increase in the number of people that were here on the Cape after 9/11, for example. So that's what the Cape is. It's really that safe place for a lot of people. But it creates a resilient economy, one that's resilient even to weather. So we saw another strong summer this year, and I think we're going to continue to see that trend.
Mm-hmm. That is really interesting. You bring up the resort versus second homeowner. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what makes it maybe a bit different?
Yeah, 37% of the housing stock on the Cape are second homes. Mm-hmm. And that ranges from a high in communities like Truro and Chatham of 70% of their housing stock are second homes, to a low in Sandwich, which is around 15 to 17%. So these are people that are vested in the community. They've purchased homes here. They feel like they are residents of the Cape. They are when they use the homes. So we're not as much sort of a Myrtle Beach kind of resort area where people are coming to stay exclusively in hotels or for day trips or golf conventions. The Cape is much more of a home vacation away. We like to say it's a short trip to far away.
Sounds good to me. So as well, we've I want to follow up on some of the changes after COVID-19. It's going to be a scar that we're going to be seeing for a long while, I'm sure. Yeah. But I had heard that more people had bought homes out here to make as their primary residence amid a big boom in working from home. Do you know if that stuck? Do we have a larger year-round population looking for goods and services now?
Yeah, I think we do. I think the data to date is somewhat anecdotal. I mean, the 2020 census saw a 6.5% increase in the Cape population compared to the 2010 census that saw almost a 3% decrease. But we have to remember that they stopped counting the census in October, and that was still right in the middle of COVID. So I'm not sure that the 2020 census caught the complete COVID-19 population shift. So, we're working now to try to sort through that. But given the real estate churn, it's clear that we do have more year-round residents, more people that maybe had homes on the Cape but retired early and so are here full-time as well. And the growth in the short-term rental market, I think, also supports, and indicates that we have more year-round residents as well as more short-term rentals.
Sure. Actually, that is a major topic as of late. I didn't used to see so many advertisements for Airbnb or Vrbo,
Yeah.
But suddenly that is a huge new industry. Not to ambush you with too many statistical questions, and if it's anecdotal, that's fine. But how have you been keeping an eye on that? How has that changed over the past few years?
We have almost 18,000 short-term rentals on the Cape now. And the growth in that market over the last 4 or 5 years could be as many as 4,000. And really what we're seeing, we have traditionally been a second homeowner community, but with the sort of advent of Airbnb and VRBO, people can use their properties now to generate income. And so maybe where they left them unoccupied for parts of the year. Now they're renting them out, which means more people in single-family homes with septic systems in the back, contributing to nitrogen issues and water quality issues. So it is an issue that we have to watch regionally.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. Now, I can't. We just did a story about how Orleans is going to be. They've proposed an article to increase the fine for failing to hook up to sewer in a particular amount of time. It's going to be for next March, and there's ways you can show the town that you're working on the sewer hookups, so you don't have to pay the fine. However, that does just bring to mind the fact that we are now seeing the push towards the new Title V septic regulations.
Right.
Do you mind giving us a quick comment about how that's going to impact the local economy?
Yeah, I mean, it remains to be seen how it's going to impact the local economy. I mean, there's been so much work done over the last 15 years really on wastewater, and almost every town is really sort of moving in the right direction on water quality issues, with wastewater leading the way. So that's all promising. And back to short-term rentals, I mean, one of the things that the delegation did on short-term rentals was institute a 2.75% tax on short-term rentals just for the Cape that goes into a Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund that offsets the cost of communities that are building wastewater systems. But that fund was set up to handle about $180 million in requests a year. We have over $500 million in requests this year. So the towns are moving on wastewater, and they're moving in the right direction. So I think that's good news. I mean, we have to do that in order to protect water quality on the Cape. And on the Cape, the environment is the economy.
Mm-hmm. Now, we're about coming up on time, but I just had a couple more questions for you related to general regional stuff. We recently, just this week, Governor Maura Healey did sign the $1 billion tax relief package. We don't need to go into super specifics, but is there anything in there that you're excited about?
I would just say in general, I mean, we're very supportive of the tax cut package. I think it's going to help Cape residents and Cape businesses in significant ways. And I think it's a signal that the state's moving in the right direction on taxes, in an effort to stop the kind of out-migration that we've seen across the state and in the region, too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I believe it had the first tax cuts in 20 years, according to what I'd seen. So very interesting stuff. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. It's been a pleasure. Is there anything else you wanted to highlight for our listeners while I still have you?
I think we've covered a lot.
All right. We've hit it all. All right. Awesome. Thank you so much, Paul, for joining me for this conversation.
Great. Thanks, Grady.
I'm Grady Collane, and this has been Sunday Journal.